Fix errors, waste, and issues in a couple of clicks. Get alerted whenever you're off track. Sign up at trueclicks.com.
Wix Studio, the platform for agencies and enterprises to manage clients and projects with max efficiency, sharing Wix's SEO tech to help you drive growth.
We have an awesome panel with us today. I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves because I'm going to butcher it and they're going to be way better at telling you what they do and how awesome they are. So, we want to start?
Okay, good morning. I'm Gareth. I've been optimizing websites for about the last 15 years. Been doing head of SEO and head of data roles. I'm currently a senior web analyst for Talkbox, which is an employee charity-focused digital agency. So, good morning.
So good morning, everyone. This is my first Brighton SEO, so I'm very excited to be here. So I'm Natasha Burtenshaw-deVries. I'm the Director of Organic Growth at Flywheel Digital. We're a Canadian growth marketing agency, so I head up our organic side. We also have a paid team and do a lot of work in analytics as well. If you couldn't tell from my accent, I live near Toronto.
And good morning, I'm Anna Rowlinson. I'm from Finland, work for Fatso, which is an FMCG in food manufacturing. And my background is in digital marketing, more of a generalist role than all channels by hand, and now looking after data-driven marketing in Fatso. Well, good morning.
Awesome. I'm going to start with a little bit of a controversial question. So I think this is like the elephant in the room, really. There's a big push in the world towards data privacy. And users don't want to give us their data, but we want all their data. But how's that going to go? What are we going to do?
I can start if that's all right. I think, yes, consumers are more aware. We don't want to give our data, especially if we don't know how it's going to be used. So I think the key is to tell people how you're going to use their data. So make sure your privacy statement is up to speed and that you're following the sort of regulations that are out there. I think that's key in making sure that we can still get the data we need to do what we need to do.
Do people click that and like say yes, or do you make it annoying so annoying they're like, just yes, take the data, leave me alone?
I think at least in our case, you have to take the privacy statement because by GDPR, for you to be compliant, you have to explicitly be able to show that people have accepted the privacy statement. So that kind of gives you the power then within what you've told the consumers. Use the data.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm kind of lucky because I don't have to deal with GDPR as much as a lot of you do, but I think like Anna said, it's, we have to be transparent. There's no other way around it. I think a lot of people, they're just going to blindly click the button and have no idea what they're actually agreeing to. But we have to be transparent, one, from a legal perspective, of course, but also because it's like, if we want people to give us their data, then we have to give them, the trust and transparency back. I think there's also something he said, like, I can't think of any good examples off the top of my head. Most people just do the legal statement to cover their butts, but, I've seen some great examples where people are actually explaining in plain language, like what it is they're agreeing to, what they're going to use it for. I think balance the legal requirements with some of that plain language transparency. I think that can go a long way in helping people come on board with, what we're using it for and how it can maybe benefit them.
If I can build on that, then I think it also comes up following up to the expectations of the people. So obviously we still want good consumer experience or customer experience. We still want a good one of that. And to produce that, we need data from people. So make sure that you then follow up with a good experience if people do give their data to you.
What about the ones that don't? We're just going to lose that data?
I think it's I think up to now, the conversation's been around kind of cookie consent because effectively that's where it's most kind of visible. But GDPR doesn't specifically talk about cookies. It talks about opting into how your data is used. So I think in the short term, we'll probably see a shift to other tracking. So, fingerprinting of devices. Android phones and Apple, they already hand over IDs when you're doing stuff anyway. So it's possible that aspects of that will get legislated against further down the line. I guess it comes back to how much data do we actually need? Is it that we're using analytics data, which is trend data, for something other than what it is? So are we trying to use it to say, well, this is how many visits our website's getting, this is how many people are looking at these pages, when actually we've got enough data to be able to say, well, do I want that number to go up or down?
And also we need to remember that only third-party cookies are going away. So first-party cookie, if you have something like customer data platform, you can still track users across your own media and own sites and try to get them to identify themselves. So that's how you then backfill the data.
I learned this morning that cookies may not be going away. Got delayed again or something?
Yes, isn't it next year?
You're saying a year?
Yeah, I brought that up. I just saw that on LinkedIn. I was literally lying in bed last night. I was like, oh, this is literally changing before our panel tomorrow. But yeah, they said they will not be fully deprecating it by the end of Q4. That's all I know now, but...
So is it still, I don't know if you know this or not, so earlier this year, like Google opted in like 1% of Chrome users to just not have cookies, which it's like a new...
Sorry, not have
third-party cookies. Sorry, this is the real analytics expert here. And yeah, they were going to move everyone away from that, but now maybe they're not.
They will do it, but it will be next year. And it's worth pointing out that Safari has been doing this for the last year or so. So on mobile, where people are using iOS, you're not getting those kind of third-party cookies. So that's only an issue if you're using a cross-site kind of advertising platform. Or, as I found out earlier this week, you've got an iframe which is setting its own cookies. iframe cookies within websites are third-party. So Safari is blocking all of those already. So if your iframe has got a GTM container, which is pushing the data back up again into the main website, you're fine. If your iframe is tracking GA4 within its own site, that's all going to get blocked, which I didn't know. It was a shock.
But yeah, I think you need to prepare for the third-party cookies going away, even though it's been postponed like so many times. We can't still rely on that piece of technology anymore. Then especially if you do retargeting, you need to think of another way. And the way we've tackled this is through the first-party data and then through these data clean rooms and things like that. So obviously the world is preparing to the time after the third-party cookies can tell us all the data we want.
What are we going to do with that? First-party data, can I make up for some of that?
I wouldn't recommend you making up out of that necessarily. I think the key is to, like I said in the beginning, be transparent about the way you collect it and make sure that you activate it as well, because until you activate the data you collect, it's just a cost, isn't it? So make sure that you have some idea of what you're going to do with the data according to what you told the consumers you're going to do with it.
I have a lot of questions for them, by the way, but if y'all have questions from the audience, you feel free to interject. Let's make this more of a conversation so we're just not going back and forth. Plus, I want to make her run with the mic. Does anyone want to ask one now? It's quite hard to hear at the back. Oh no. I think we're all trying not to talk too loud because we're afraid of the feedback and the speakers too. But I will try and project more. That actually doesn't seem to be feedbacking now.
It's not going to be feedback.
Oh, there's another speaker back there even. I'm just curious on this, because I'm not in the EU. Is advanced consent mode, is that going to fly here? Is that going to work?
So we've put in basic consent mode specifically because of that. So for those that don't know, advanced consent mode basically sends anonymous pings on the page that you're on, but then when you agree to the cookie, it backfills all that data. So originally, as a team, we thought that was happening site-wide, and we were kind of going, well, that's absolutely illegal, that can't be right. But the advanced consent mode only works on the page you're on. So basically, if someone's interacted with the page, then they click the consent, then it will backfill all of that data. And in the meantime, you're getting anonymous data around everything else they're doing on the website. And Google is going to use that information to feed into machine learning to kind of give you some idea about what's going on. I think there's definitely, and I'm not a lawyer, I think there's definitely concerns around how that works.
Yeah, I can't imagine if you can match up to a user on a particular page, I would think you could match that to the rest of the user data on all the other pages.
That's not allegedly how it works, but I think there's an idea.
There's like data stitching and stuff. Like, people are going to do that.
So it's obviously not fully anonymous. So when they're on that page, there's obviously something which they can use to tie together anonymous and then non-anonymous data. So yeah, but it doesn't work site-wide. So if you leave the page, then something is reset. But yeah.
Supposedly.
Allegedly. Maybe.
That was going to be an interesting one for the lawyers, I think. How about analytics in general? I think it's getting harder. Like we just talked about consent mode. There's cookie banners, GA4. Does anyone like GA4, by the way? One person. In the entire room, one person likes GA4. Why do you like it?
Most of the interesting stuff that I was doing in Universal Analytics was event-based. And so it is really interesting. I draw a distinction between the UI, which in GA4 is getting much, much better, and the data collection framework underneath it. So with Universal Analytics, you obviously had page views and you had event data, and it did mean that you were then running all events on, for example, like JavaScript or JS, like a Node.js website was always going to be event-based anyway. So single page websites where it's updating the DOM in a slightly different way didn't work with UA because the URL's not updating, but bits of the DOM are. So actually we were always using event data to do that. And for me, GA4 does that. But the user interface, it's aimed at a slightly different audience. I think the barrier to using those reports is much, much harder because you're expected to know different things. I think UA led you into particular reports in terms of it's really clear. This is where my traffic's coming from. This is what they did. I think in GA4, I tend to go straight into the Explore reports, or I'm having to overlay filters and kind of segments and things in order to get to the report that I used to be able to get to quite quickly. But I think the underlying data collection's much better.
Interesting. There's not a lot of websites. I do a lot of technical SEO. Not a lot of websites that deal with like single page applications. So it seems like that's kind of a very specific thing that they solve for while potentially making other things worse.
Yeah, I wonder whether that's because so much of search traffic is now kind of mobile, so they were expecting it maybe to go more app focused. But anyway.
That's a good point. Yeah. But there's all these changes. How do y'all keep up? Is there like a newsletter I can subscribe to, a blog that I should be reading?
I just make my team do it for me.
Make your team.
I mean, I like to joke about it. It's a love-hate relationship. Like Gareth said, there are so many great things about it. And there's moments where, like, especially with the Explore reports, it's like, you know, the event-based tracking unlocks so much, especially about user engagement. And it is nice that there's so much flexibility in reports and stuff. And there's times where it's just like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm an analytics genius. And then there's other moments where it's like, can you just give me this really simple thing and not make me do like 20 steps and take half an hour to do it? So it's love, hate, we're learning. But yeah, I think it's just becoming like you said, it's a different user it's targeted at than before. I feel really bad, especially for like all the small business owners out there who just want to know a little bit about how people are getting to their website, and GA4 really is not it for that. And yeah, it's just like one person can only do so much. I've almost had to like accept that I cannot be a GA4 master and just start leaning more on other people, like internally and externally, to figure out what we need. It's become so much bigger and we just can't do it on our own anymore, which is frustrating, but we just kind of have to accept it and find the right people to help you get what you need.
But I think GA4 gets bad rep for also almost for nothing. I think all the technology changes, right? And we just need to kind of go with it. And there are great resources online on learning how to do bits and bobs there. And yeah, I get your point about small business owners. The UI is not intuitive to start with. But once you get kind of the hang of it, I think because it's a lot more flexible, it gives you more things to deep dive in without the kind of specialist knowledge, as long as you just kind of know where to click and what dimensions and things to put there.
I feel like it's also good to acknowledge that we would have complained any time that GA4 was rolled out. Let's be real. But I think the fact that it came after, we've all been through so much, personally and professionally in the last few years, businesses have completely changed. The economy has changed. So the fact that we're having to deal with a massive change in how we get our data and understand all those changes, that's just made it even more difficult.
What was that question? I think.
One sec. Let's get the microphone.
You?
Oh, okay. I'm interested in, we're talking about GA4 and event-based model and event-based analytics. It's obviously not the first event-based analytics tool out there. How do you, I'm not totally familiar with your use case, but have you explored some of the other alternatives in that space, thinking Amplitude, Mixpanel, a whole bunch of different ones? How do you think GA4, because ultimately GA4 is kind of following that trend, how do you feel it compares to some of those tools, if you've looked into that?
I have to admit, I haven't. We've looked at a couple of more privacy-focused ones, so things like Fathom and a couple of others. But yeah, no, I haven't specifically looked at event models across other ones. And almost all of our clients are expecting GA4. So I've been at Torchbox for a year, and we haven't had a client who didn't want that setup.
I think you see that more commonly in the enterprise space, especially if you're dealing with paid search teams. They create all the audiences and all the lots of data stitching and everything to kind of make sense of it. But I never personally used them either.
The same here. I haven't really explored them. I guess GA4 has done the job for us.
Yeah, I know in our case, I haven't personally worked with Mixpanel, but I know a few other clients, particularly on the paid side, have used it. I've had a few clients use Heap as well, which has been all right. I know that our main challenge there has just been another platform to learn how to use. So yeah, I have had a few clients who prefer Heap over GA4. But for our clients, especially when we're really the ones kind of taking charge and setting up their analytics stuff, we've just stuck within the Google ecosystem because it's just easier.
Hi. I have a question for a person who is a little bit frustrated with GA4. What are good resources to start? What are good points to, people to follow or websites to search or anything?
Well, I can definitely recommend Krista. I think if her surname's pronounced Seiden. She's an ex-Googler, and she runs this excellent training on Google Analytics 4. I did it, and I actually trained our digital marketing team on the back of it, and I'm not a data analyst at all. So I think Krista Seiden, I can tell you how to spell that later on. I'll look it up. I think her course was excellent.
Two resources I would recommend. One is she's named Dana DiTomaso, fellow Canadian. So she has some great LinkedIn learning resources. I know her agency has also released GA4 training for agencies, as well as I think they just released an individual course. Another person I would shout out, his name is Marco. I can't remember his last name, but he has a great newsletter called SEO-tistics. I love that one because it's analytics, but really SEO focused. So I think the other thing is you just have to keep doing it hands-on and just kind of fight your way through it, and nothing beats the hands-on experience.
I think I'm going to go for Simo Ahava, whose name I've just absolutely butchered. It's quite technical. It's very much around the GTM side of it, but an absolutely amazing resource. And Julian at, I think, Measure Camp. I think that's his name. He does a lot of YouTube videos, which are excellent. They're across Looker Studio, they're across analytics and across GTM. So yeah, these two are good.
I have a personal like GA4 question. How could I like get more than 14 months of data? Like they just drop it, right?
No.
No.
So after 14 months, you've still got your top level aggregated reports, but it's the personal specific kind of user stuff that goes. Because I thought the same.
Wow.
When I said to my team, how do we get around this? And they were like, well, that's not how it works. And I was like, oh, okay, great. So yes, you still get data after 14 months, but it's more aggregated. Otherwise, you're looking at exporting it into BigQuery.
Okay.
And then this is
So now you got to store it. How much does that cost?
I've been looking at that as well. It's not that much. So it's more on usage than storage. But the problem is it is just a database. So there's no UI connected to it. So unless you're writing an SQL, then it's a bit harder.
Use ChatGPT for that. It's actually pretty good coded.
It's not bad. Claude better.
Claude, okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Try it out.
I have a quick question. Have any of you solved how to annotate GA4? Because we've gone from putting it now into a spreadsheet, which is crazy, and just so that everyone, quite a matrix organisation, everyone can see why we think that that's happened. But annotations, have any of you heard it even on the roadmap for them to bring in? So there was talk they were going to do it, and then
I can always tell you that I love them in UA, but no, I haven't. Sorry, not there.
I always feel like we should be able to vote, and everyone just go, "Can we have annotations back, please?" Okay.
If anybody from Google is watching this, please add annotations.
But yeah, I wanted to add to the export into BigQuery that if you want to go and build the analytics infrastructure, then being able to export your data is key. Like I think the UI won't be enough, even though GA4, the export section is excellent. I think you need to start thinking big and like exporting the data anyway, or a data analyst or data scientist to go through.
I think that's just like a one-click thing, right? It's super easy to send it to BigQuery from analytics.
I actually wouldn't know, to be fair, because there's a team who does that for us. I wouldn't know.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I just arrived, so I don't know if you already talked about this. Are you facing any issues about sampling in J4? Like, especially in the Explore section, when I create my own custom reports, I see that most of the time, if I use a lot of granularity in data and also comparing data against the previous year, there is a lot of sampling, and so I try to avoid that by going on request and sample report, or preferring, instead of faster results, more detailed results. But I don't think that's the best solution, so I don't know if Google has acknowledged that, and if there is anything that they can do to avoid that for the users in general. Thank you.
I'd say if it's a real problem that it's kind of sampling and you think that's kind of skewing the overall trend in the data, then I think you're looking at putting it into BigQuery, because obviously it's doing that for processing and to give you reports quickly. But putting that into BigQuery would allow you to obviously have much more detailed data, so you can get around that sampling issue.
And I was thinking, I don't know whether it would work in your case, but if you can shorten the time period, because I think it's based on the limit of the, can't remember what the name of, there's a limit anyway for the API call. I think it must be down to that. But if you can then shorten the time period that you're looking, perhaps you would get around it.
I think that's an interesting topic in general. Like, for analytics, I don't think any data set is really complete, and seems to be getting worse and worse. So a question for the panel, is the data still useful?
Yes.
Okay. That was easy. No, it's I really think like that's it's a fascinating topic. Like we keep getting like worse and worse data, but we still have to make the decisions based on this data. And like it's not even matching up between data sets. You get all kinds of sampling. It's not just GA, like the same issue even in Google Search Console data for SEO. Like they have the Bloom filters, and like you do some filters and suddenly like the data doesn't match what is in the actual reporting. How can we make sure that's reliable? Is just dump it to BigQuery? That seems like a terrible solution. Like that's a very technical, write some SQL queries. You all happy with that solution? No.
I think it comes from almost like shifting the way that we're thinking about that data. So analytics data has always been trend data. But again, I'm sure we've all had it where clients say to us, why doesn't this match my database? So particularly around transactional data where it's going through a funnel. And it's like, well, because this is from a website, you know, there's so many different things that can get in the way of that actually being recorded properly. But with it being trend data, I think it comes back to the fact that actually we've still got enough data to be able to influence what we want to happen with that number. So is it we want it to go up? Is it we want it to go down? And that comes back to measurement planning. That comes back to being able to kind of go, well, here's our digital strategy. Here's the objectives. Here's the KPIs that we want against it. And here's the tactical things that we're going to do over the next quarter in order to move that number. But yes, as soon as you get into, is this data set complete? I mean, I did some tests around the cookie banner where I was looking at clicks from Google Search Console compared to organic traffic on the site. And it was a 60% drop pre and post the cookie banner being implemented because they had a really strict implementation of it. So it was like, well, okay, so we're now down to 40% of the data that we had previously.
Yeah.
So
their implementation, I assume in this case, was if you don't accept like the cookie, they also don't fire the analytics tag.
You could use the site perfectly without accepting the analytics, without accepting any, which is how you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to have a big interstitial. You're not supposed to be able to kind of like have it in front so you can't do anything, which is what they did. So it was absolutely 100% compliant, but it was a 60% drop in recorded traffic. That traffic's still on the website, you just don't know what it's doing. So in that case, it's like, well, okay, we need to fundamentally shift the way that we're using this data.
Is that going to lead to more like server-side tracking, do you think, eventually? I think there's trade-offs, like you lose some maybe additional data for like matching up to the customer, but like you actually get to see how many people were there more accurately. Is that going to be a thing?
Yes, and I think the problems like GDPR was never around cookie consent. It was always around agreeing to the use of personal data. And I think server-side gets around the cookie part of it, and that's going to work for, I don't know, a couple of years probably. But at some point, the legislation will catch up with that and say, well, actually, if you want to use server-side tracking, you need to have explicit consent. And then we're back to where we are now.
But I think it goes back to Gareth's point earlier about what is the amount of data you need. Because surely no one looks at data and says, okay, this is 100% true, right? That if we do this, this will happen. Like, you just need to kind of balance like what you're trying to solve with what you have, make a decision, and then obviously look back how you did. So even if the data set is not complete, there's a lot you can do with it.
Yeah, I think we just have to accept in this privacy-focused world, like the data may not be perfect, but that doesn't mean it doesn't still tell us great things about how people are interacting with our site and our business. It's frustrating, I think, especially for the non-marketers who want that perfect data. But it is what it is. We just sometimes have to work with what we've got.
Do you do like any education for your teams to help them like understand this stuff, like some cross-training, or like, because if they're one trying to look at this data and they're like, this doesn't make any sense, like they're just gonna be like, well, the data's wrong, or like you're wrong. So what do you do about that?
I think that you need to get people to understand that it's not, if they're like non-technical or non-analyst kind of background, for them to understand that it's not the pure truth that you would read in the newspaper. Just get into the mindset that it's data, it's collected in a certain way, it might have some flaws, but like I said, you can still probably do something with it. And I think it comes down to upskilling as well. Like, I don't know, there's a talk I think going on at some point about like is SEO analyst a real analyst or something like that. And I think all the roles we do, we need to understand data in one level or another. And it's about upskilling so that we don't get into this conversations of, oh, why is this thing different here? Why is Shopify different to GA4? Why is the revenue different? What can I trust and so forth? There's a question.
1 second, Mike.
Not to sort of, don't know, going to belay the whole GA4 conversation, but clearly there's a lot of dissatisfaction out there. You read it, see it everywhere. It's still a very powerful tool, but with issues. Outside of just inertia, in terms of we've always used Google Analytics, so we carry on doing it, what are the things that are locking in yourselves and your clients to, we must continue to use Google? What are the things that ultimately are stopping them from using other tools?
Money. Yeah. GA4 is free. Yeah, it does a good enough job, or the cost of it, which is none. Obviously, the monetary cost is none. There's some labor cost involved. But yeah, I think that's the biggest block on, because it does good enough job.
I think the integration with AdWords is a huge factor there, and GA4's changing. So everything will be a key event, with key conversions being the same as they are in AdWords, because it's always been a bit annoying that the attribution models were different in AdWords. I say annoying. It just took a bit of time to explain that actually even how you attribute a conversion isn't always the same, and if you use a different model, so you're not just using last click, if we're using like a continuous click where it's kind of you're attributing all the way through that buying process, which is a much better way of doing it, and it stops people using AdWords in a very blunt end of kind of funnel way. But they're changing it now, because obviously with key conversions they will be the same in GA4 as they are in AdWords, with everything else which was a conversion previously a goal now being a key event. So that they're obviously tying that in even closer. For me, that's probably the biggest thing, is that people are so invested in that kind of ecosystem with AdWords that it makes sense to use GA4 alongside that.
That AdWords that you guys are Google Ads, their conversion tracking always led for it looks better for paid. that model in general was a way for Google to sell more ads, I think. And now they're making everyone use that in GA. Cool.
Yep.
Hi there. As an agency, can you give clients reliable data with GA4 and focusing on KPIs in numbers? Is this still possible with this data and cookies and all that stuff?
I think it comes back to that word reliable. I think that, so for example, when I was doing SEO reporting for rankings, we would either use Ahrefs or we would use Google Search Console. But even then, I remember having a client who was really upset that another competitor was above him, and we sent him screenshots from all the way around the country saying, yeah, that's specifically for you within that personalized search, probably because you've used their website a lot. For the rest of us, we are not getting that. So the idea that you can even give reliable rankings to people is, as soon as you start digging into that, it gets really, really knotty. So I would say you absolutely can have good kind of KPIs, and the work that you're doing can affect those KPIs, so you can kind of show whether that number's kind of come up or down, because the standard of data collection during the time period will hopefully not have changed too much.
I think the other thing there, coming from the agency's perspective, is we've been doing a lot of work, particularly in the last 6 months or so, of not just relying on like GA4 web analytics, but integrating more with our client's source of truth. Like, for example, we're working with HubSpot a lot more with our clients. It's no longer just the CRM where they, do the sales and emails and all of that. Like, we're using a lot more for reporting. So that's given us a lot more insight. Again, we're never going to have the perfect data, but it's given us more than we could just get in GA4. So I think that's a big thing, is just getting closer to those sources of truth. Difficult from an agency perspective, because clients don't always want to give us access to that data. Sometimes there's even like legal and security loopholes to jump through with getting access to it. So it's not easy, but it is worth it, because it's going to get you closer to, the best picture possible.
And coming from the client side, I think I'd really appreciate kind of being transparent, that if you have some data and also problems measuring or reporting back a KPI, just explain it in plain words so that the client understands and not try to like dress it up as a nice number if it isn't that.
So I heard HubSpot has data that Google doesn't have. Is that why Google's trying to buy them?
Who knows?
Hi. You mentioned advanced consent mode earlier, and then you talked about cookie banner too. It's still really unclear to me. So you said that with the cookie banner being at 100% sort of efficiency, that the amount of people you could track went down by 60%. How does the advanced consent mode solve that or not?
Yeah, so I think we said earlier, so the thing with advanced consent mode is it's sending anonymous data prior to the cookie banner being accepted. But once you've clicked on it, it then backfills the data for that page. So it doesn't work across the website.
When you say that page, the cookie consent page, or just anything you went to before?
So for example, if someone lands on your homepage and they maybe go to another page and then they start interacting with that page, then they click the consent banner, then for that page only, it will be able to backfill what they did. So if they started watching a video, then click consent, you'll know that they started watching a video. Otherwise, across the rest of the website, you're getting anonymous data, which Google isn't showing you, but is starting to use in its machine learning models. I think at some point we will get to a stage where Google uses that anonymous data, and it maybe even uses something like Search Console data to go, well, we know that the traffic to your site is 20-30% higher than the reporting currently shows, so we're going to increase it using a machine learning model. So actually, the data that you're being shown isn't what was directly captured on the website anyway.
But that's only a problem if you allow people to use your site without clicking on the banner.
Yes.
So if you don't allow people on, it's fine. It's not an issue.
Legally,
that's what I'm trying to get. I'm not.
Yeah, no. So legally, if you look at the criteria for what is a proper GDPR compliant cookie banner, you're supposed to be able to use the website without clicking on anything. So the fact that you've got cookie banners which kind of come across and they actually kind of do that, technically that's against GDPR. It's just that no one's enforcing that.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I'm a little surprised, because anyone would risk that because of the GDPR penalties. I'm from the US, so I don't have to deal with that. But those penalties seem steep.
I thought the ICO was doing a 5-year data collection project just to see how it was being implemented.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
So another question in the back, I thought.
Sorry, just in with what you're saying about the banner, obviously we've found that people interact more when it pops up on screen, and obviously from what you're saying, it's not entirely compliant, but no one's really pulling you up on it. Do you think they'll probably become stricter in the future with that?
I genuinely don't know. I don't know whether they'll go, yes, it's good enough. People are being allowed to give consent. And because I think there's a slight loophole in that, because it's an interstitial, it doesn't necessarily stop you interacting with the page. It just makes it really awkward. So that isn't necessarily directly breaking that directive. But I don't know which side they'll come down on. If they kind of look at it and go, well, we don't like the fact that people are using interstitials, it has to be a strict implementation.
There were a couple comments from a few minutes ago about KPIs. So what kind of KPIs are y'all using? I assume you do reporting to a bunch of different teams, right? How do you figure out what each team needs and what you're going to show them? It's kind of complex. Sorry.
Well, I think it starts with the business problem. What is the audience's thing? What are they being measured on? What do they want to know? And then just digesting it down from there. Obviously, the executive level will be a lot higher for it to spend and return, Whereas if you have a more operative role, then you want to look at the nitty-gritty metrics that impact those KPIs.
Yeah, that's kind of exactly the process that we would take. So we normally hold a workshop where we talk around what are the user journeys, what are the particular things that someone is trying to do within that stage. And actually that varies massively. So Torchbox effectively just works for charities. So we do a lot of work around information kind of resources, which is obviously a massively important thing, around donation journeys and around fundraising as well. But those three things don't ever happen at the same time. So when someone's looking to get information, they're not thinking about donating. That's likely to be later on. So your information kind of section kind of objectives are going to be very, very different from your donation ones. So we generally talk about who are the personas, who are the kind of users that are using that particular section, what is it you want them to do? So is it you want them to download an information pack? Is it you want them to sign up to an email? And from that, you can then break down that big objective, which isn't metric based, down to actual metrics to kind of go, well, we're going to use newsletter sign-ups, we're going to use this and this. And then you've got some nice numbers, which are in graphs, which are really linked back to the broader digital strategy. The only caveat is that if you start doing that, and actually the client's not really able to talk through their digital strategy in an articulate way, you've got a problem.
I think it's also really important to distinguish between channel level KPIs and business level KPIs, because some people will say like, oh, your only KPI is like revenue and conversion. So it's like, oh no, we do have to measure things at the channel level too. The problem is that a lot of people just don't distinguish properly between them. Like, some people may disagree, but like organic traffic is a KPI. It's just not the only one and we should be focused on. So making that distinction is really important. I think it's also important just to recognize that KPIs do change over time because the business changes, we focus on different things. So like Gareth said, you really have to be tying that into like your bigger digital strategy and user journeys and all of that, but you have to recognize that that changes over time. So you have to update your KPIs and how you look at your tracking as you go.
What about reporting tools? How do y'all actually like put this in a dashboard or send them PDF reports?
We use Looker Studio a lot. It makes, it's just nice to have that kind of executive level look at the data, especially when you're working with people who aren't as data savvy and they can't navigate analytics platforms themselves. So we always have that. We also just still do a lot of our reporting in like slides, and we've also started using Notion a lot more. I'm a slides girl, but a lot of my team prefers Notion, so I'm like, fine, as long as it looks good, I can compromise there. But yeah, it's pretty much just Looker Studio. That's our big one.
I think it depends if you want it to be static or something that the user can interact with, because obviously slides are nice, but then they're just fairly static. You can't really ask questions from the slides, but if you have something like we have Power BI, and that's quite powerful because you can build different levels, like executive level or more operative, and then you can kind of look around. And I think it's important to have the consolidated view on things. So not just one account or one channel, but seeing how the business is doing as a whole. I think that's the benefit of using some kind of BI tool, Looker Studio or Power BI or other.
Yeah, that's a really good point about like the dynamic versus static stuff. Because like static reports have their place, but yeah, you want to be able to interact with the data too.
Yeah, exactly the same for us. We use Looker, we use obviously kind of Google Sheets, but we also we have like a set kind of like insight report that we might do every kind of 6 months, where we actually kind of lead the client through, well, this is what we did, these are the changes we were making, this is the impact that's actually had, and that means we've got a nice element of being able to build a narrative around the work that we're doing, as well as giving them like always on the report so they can go and look at as well.
So very much Google and Microsoft for everything.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's some control right there.
I will give a shout out to Supermetrics too. I pull a lot of data there into Sheets, so you can just like analyze and manipulate it a bit better, but I find that's usually like internal analysis. We don't use it too much for actual client reporting.
Are there any favorite like data visualizations that your clients like really love? I'm a big data viz guy, so I'm always curious to some new chart or something I can show.
orders by hour heat mapped over the week.
That sounds complex to make.
Literally, it's a button.
Okay.
It's brilliant. So you can do either sessions, for example, so you can then put a country filter on it as well. So that one I really like, because it gives you a really nice idea about when the website's kind of getting visits and actually does that equal orders, or so, yeah.
That would be like crazy for like troubleshooting. But I can imagine like some of the executives out there looking at that and be like, well, at like 11 a.m. on this day, the orders were down 30%. Why? And I'm like, now you got to spend hours like figuring that out.
Yeah.
Suppose you don't need to know those details. I don't know if I have any real favorites. I think nothing beats just a good old line graph, especially when you can show like, year-over-year growth or something. Clients love that. Probably the only one I can really think of is I love using shout out to Ahrefs when you can compare competitor data. Clients are all over that. They love knowing how their competitors are doing, especially when they're above the competitors.
I don't think I have any favorites as such either, but I think the key is just to make sure that the visualization makes sense, so don't make it too fancy. Just one point per visualization, and make sure that it's understandable, overlooking good. Like, obviously it's nice if it looks good as well, but make sure that you get the point across. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's massive, because there's I work with, I coach my team on this stuff, and sometimes it's just like, what is this chart for? Was this the right one? Not to hate on them if they're listening to this later, but like that's really key, is you have to make sure it's actually communicating what you want it to communicate, because a lot of the times it doesn't.
So no Looker Studio reports with like 14 pages, like everything.
Thankfully, no, but yeah, you really gotta, like you said, simple is good, and make sure it's the right one for what you actually want to communicate. That's key.
Any questions out here? Anyone? Nope. Okay.
Oh,
No, there's one.
There's a question.
Sorry. Can see you back there.
Hi, it's not a question. I didn't get the visualization tool that you mentioned that you preferred the most, your favorite visualization.
Oh, sorry, no, that's just in Looker.
Looker, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a pretty standard tool. They can plug the viewpoints in. It's complex to set up though for some of the integrations, I think. I'm sort of surprised it's as popular as it is. Like, because I've struggled to set some of those up, and like usually they're pretty technical on that stuff. But I guess as long as like companies have one person that can do that, like it sort of works.
Yeah, they can be temperamental.
Okay.
They can be temperamental.
On that point, has anyone had any experience with Power BI and Copilot? Because if you think about upskilling yourself, it's pretty neat that you can use Copilot to build Power BI dashboards.
You just tell it what you want, and it's like, there you go.
I'm not quite sure it works just like that. No, I think that the premise is that is exactly just prompted to do what you want. But I think that's a neat development in upskilling everyone, that these kind of things become more available to people who are not traditionally skilled up to do that.
It's just I've built some with like Python. Like there's a lot of great data visualization tools within that, and like lets you stitch data together. But like I would never expect other people to be able to do that. But maybe now with some of the stuff like Copilot and all, like we'll see if that becomes more common or not. Probably not. Since we're talking about that, actually, the AI, machine learning, how do y'all see that changing, like analytics? You mentioned earlier something I thought was interesting, that they might basically show you a number that's not necessarily the number they recorded, like extrapolate the data and say, like, this is how many people I think were there.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things around, so one of the reasons for changing to GA4 was machine learning, so they can actually build it it's much more in that platform than it was in UA, because obviously UA was 10, 12 years old by that point, so it's quite old, 10 years, something like that. So yes, whether they'll have a button which says turn off machine learning, I don't know, but I can definitely see it going that way.
It's someone who builds a lot of dashboards. the problem with that is like if people are like, this doesn't match up with the data, like there's going to be a lot of questions. So it'd be interesting to see if they have like maybe two different lines, like one it's like a dotted line or something that's like, this is the estimated machine learning forecast, and this is like what we actually recorded or something. But if they just switch to that, ooh, well, it's a good thing they don't have a support team to answer all those questions, because they would get a lot of them. How about anything else? With anything interesting?
I think it opens up a lot of possibility in like helping us analyze things. Like, you know, I think a lot of the focus on, say, ChatGPT so far, and it's not machine learning, but has been on like content creation and automating a lot of those more like menial tasks. So I think it will unlock a lot there, especially in terms of like cleaning up data, kind of basic understanding. But it's gonna shift how we use those tools. So again, like maybe we don't have to be the ones rating metadata anymore because we have tools to help with it, but we have to learn how to use those tools and ask the right questions. I think it's like we kind of talked a little bit about earlier, like analytics is becoming so much more technical, and it's really hard because we can only learn so many things. But it's also like if you know how to ask the right questions, I think these tools will be able to unlock a lot for us without having to do the actual like manual analysis ourselves. So that's something I'm really excited for. I know GA4 in particular, it's got that like insight section where it'll point out things. I feel like we should all be using that more because it actually has some cool stuff. So I think we're only just scratching the surface there.
Sorry, one sec. So is it going to take our job or like help us do the job easier?
Help us do the job. Unfairly, it's not going to take our jobs, maybe some of them, but it's just, you know, it's like, think of manufacturing. You know, we may not be doing as many things by hands anymore, but that you have to have the people to make the more advanced machines. I don't know anything about that. That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, it's going to change the jobs, so it's not going to take them away.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article similar to what you're talking about, where I literally just fed Ahrefs data from like different reports into ChatGPT-4, and I was like, what can I do with this basically? Like, what kind of visuals can I create? What are interesting ways I can use this? And I ended up with like 13 or 14 things on the blog that were like really interesting use cases. Actually, some of the heat maps and stuff. There were really interesting visuals that like I hadn't thought of before, and I was like, oh, I'm so sad. This thing is better than I am.
I think there's a question, but if I can quickly just add before the question, I spoke to a vendor lately, and they said that they built this executive level dashboard where the execs could chat with the dashboard. So that I thought that was actually a pretty neat use case of like Gen AI and language learning models that they could kind of ask, so what was the revenue from this, or what were the sales in there, instead of them asking their teams, like, can you find out this for me? And they could kind of interact through chat with the dashboard. I thought that was excellent.
So someone's offloading all the time, did execs are like, I want to know, why did that drop 30% at 11 a.m.?
So yeah, we don't have to deal with that anymore.
But still, AI won't take our jobs because you do need someone who can interpret things, right? So you need to have the human brain and value in there. But I think those kind of tasks, like, it can help us. There's a question there, I think, sorry.
Sorry. Just to add, I think there's a distinction between what AI can do now and what it's going to be able to do in 2 years' time. So I think computers was always 18 months. So you could always do what you could do 18 months ago in half the time and half the capacity, whatever. With AI, that's apparently 6 months. So basically every year it's twice as good as it was at the beginning of the year. So if you think about how good it is now, in 2 years' time, it could potentially be 4 times better at doing stuff. So it would definitely change the way that we work.
Or how bad it was, because I remember it was probably, I want to say it was probably 2014 in Google Analytics. They actually had a thing where you could type and ask the question, and like no one used it because it just was bad at answering.
My question is kind of connected to that point. It was ultimately like, yeah, AI is a powerful tool, and probably most people in the room have tried ChatGPT in some shape or form. But if you asked an AI question or to query your data and it gave you an answer, would you trust it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's a really difficult one. It's something similar. I was trying to get ChatGPT to reformat a table for me. So it was all in HTML. It was an absolute nightmare. I couldn't get it. So I was just like, right, just reformat that. And the second time it did it, I started seeing results which weren't there. So it obviously just started hallucinating. And I was like, okay, what is that second line? And he was like, oh yeah, sorry about that. And did it again. And it's like, well, okay. So yeah, you definitely have to check it. And there is a problem in that if it does something wrong, who's going to pick that up?
One sec, microphone.
I couldn't help laughing inwardly, thinking about execs querying data using AI and just thinking, they're going to come up with some weird-ass answers and you're going to get more questions than you really want from that.
I have to say that the data was only based on the stuff that was on the dashboard, so it wasn't like generating random answers for them. But I think the answer to your question, I don't think you should blindly trust anything just yet. I don't think they are powerful enough, but maybe one day.
I remember when ChatGPT came out, people were asking like basic questions like, what's 1 + 1 is? Like 5? It's like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure.
The technology of the future.
Yeah. But I think that was like somewhat based more on the content. Now that you can like upload your own data, I'm more keen to trust it, but yeah, not fully personally, I would say.
But it seems to start making things up if it doesn't know. That's the problem with numbers. Like if you don't really know your data and you look at, hold on, what's that spike somewhere? Like it seems to be making stuff up, which is strange. And I find that Copilot does the same, and that's even weirder when it's based on your, like, the stuff you have on your, like, behind your Microsoft profile. And it's really weird how it comes up with some random data and numbers. I think I don't trust it blindly.
I've seen some prompt hacks where like no matter what you're doing, you should always like ask, are you sure? Are you really sure? So it's like, because sometimes it's just like, oh, I'm sorry. Like you were saying like, oh, I got this wrong. Sorry. It's like, what? Why? Any more audience questions? I think we have time for one more if someone wants. Right here in the front. Wait for the microphone, please.
That is so bad.
Just on the topic of insights, are there any platforms that you tend to lean towards or recommend? So like GA4 like now recommends insights, doesn't it? And stuff like Google Trends and Glimpse. Like industry insights, anything like that?
I don't do a lot around industry kind of insights, so I haven't got any. Sorry.
Google Trends sometimes, although I find, particularly working with a lot of Canadian clients, the data honestly just sucks unless it's something really popular. Like I find if you're from a bigger country, there's more data, but it's hit or miss whether it actually provides anything useful. I know SparkToro came out with their new like version 2, playing around with the free version. It seemed to come up with some interesting things, but that's, yeah, usually when we're just pulling like insights and stuff, it's just from the web data. We don't really deal like the audience insight side of things too much.
Not for me, unfortunately.
I'll just say that Google Trends in particular, like I deal with that data a lot. I don't trust it at all. No. For instance, there's a lot of Google tools that are like this, including Google Ads, but like they group things together that really shouldn't be together, especially if it's like an acronym. It'd be like the acronym means 5 different things, and they're like, well, it's all one, and they group the volume from like all 5 of those things into one. Or just I always use this example with SEOs, but like there's SEO, like the people, and then there's SEOs, which is like an access control technology. But for SEOs, they're like, oh, it's SEOs, like multiple SEOs. And in Google Ads and like Google Trends and all this stuff, it's literally all grouped together as if it's one thing. And I'm like, these are 2 completely different topics. And so like all that data is like a bit iffy to me, at least. Anyway, I want to have you all, I know you all have talks here. So can we go down the line and tell me when you're talking, what you're talking about?
Yes, so I'll be talking tomorrow at MeasureFest at 9:30 about first-party data in marketing and what we've done and how we used it.
I will also be in the MeasureFest room at 3:20 tomorrow talking about how to do better reporting without better math.
And I'm talking at 1:40 again at MeasureFest about optimizing GTM containers.
Perfect.
Demand sphere. Limitless visual insights from the SERPs. Unlimited dashboards and users. Easy to use and easy to scale your growth to new levels.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.